The U.S. and NATO are beginning nuclear drills today and take place amid Russia conducting its own nuclear exercises. Our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, is also on the scene in Ukraine for us. Good morning, Ian.
Yeah, good morning, Robin. This is the latest salvo from Russia in their escalating aerial war against Ukraine. Over the last few days, we've seen increasing use of drones and missiles against various targets around the country. This as tensions between Russia and America continue.
This morning, as the Ukrainian capital's attacked again, NATO kicks off nuclear training exercises in Europe. The pre-planned drills taking place in Belgium, the North Sea and the United Kingdom, involving 14 countries with up to 60 aircraft, including US B-52 long-range bombers. Russia's holding its own nuclear drills this month, likely to also include live missiles like previous years. Vladimir Putin stoking nuclear fears recently over US and NATO support for Ukraine, calling a direct conflict a very dangerous move which could lead to a global catastrophe. Now the Kremlin sending almost 9,000 soldiers to Belarus to allegedly protect its strategic border it shares with Ukraine. Soldiers and equipment seen here arriving by train to join a Russian-Belarusian joint force, stoking fears of a potential new front in the war. But despite the outward shows of strength, Russia facing mounting internal issues with their military recruitment and morale. The Washington Post reporting men of fighting age are being taken from the streets and their places of work, coerced to join the fight, and Russia even forced to recruit from its own prisons. President Zelensky saying, "This is how the Russian state is sponsoring terror. It's looking for killers in prisons and promises them freedom if they kill again." This as Russia admits 2 volunteer soldiers from an ex-Soviet nation attacked one of their own military bases over the weekend where new recruits were training, leaving 11 Russian soldiers dead, 15 wounded.
Well, Vladimir Putin clearly having problems domestically, but also here on the ground in Ukraine. Up until a few weeks ago, this town was occupied by Russia, but the Ukrainians are advancing, the Russians are retreating, and that's why we're seeing Putin resorting increasingly to the use of drones and missile strikes against innocent civilian targets.
Much like in the way of propaganda, we see American legacy media showing Russia as the instigator to the conflict and not telling the truth about why the conflict even exists in the first place. And this is so the American people can get behind a war that they agree with. And for years, you've been told that Russia is the enemy to democracy, that the communist nation itself is led by a madman. And even though that is true, that they are led by a madman, it is no less true that the United States are led by multiple madmen and women. And they reside in the House and Senate, the White House, the Pentagon, the CIA, and the Defense Intelligence Agencies, as well as the private military industrial complex, AIPAC, and the Gulf lobbies. According to Andre Damon on the World Socialist website, U.S. rehearses dropping nuclear bombs in Europe. On Monday, the NATO military alliance will be holding a training exercise known as Steadfast Noon, in which U.S. B-52 bombers and F-16 fighters will simulate dropping atomic bombs over Europe amid a deepening nuclear standoff with Russia. Training exercise comes just 10 days after President Biden warned of a nuclear apocalypse, saying the risk of nuclear war is the greatest since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Hans Christensen of the Federation of American Scientists said, quote, "This is the exercise that practices NATO's nuclear strike mission with dual capability aircraft and the B-61 tactical nuclear bombs the U.S. deploys in Europe," end quote. The aircraft will rehearse dropping B-61 tactical thermal nuclear bombs, each of which is up to 20 times more powerful than the weapon that destroyed Hiroshima in World War II, killing as many 126,000 civilians. And while nuclear training exercises are usually presented as routine, non-threatening, and not targeting any specific country, this year NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg made clear that the exercise is intended as a threat to Russia. In a speech that mentioned Russia 5 times, Stoltenberg announced, quote, "Next week, NATO will hold its long-planned deterrence exercise, Steadfast Noon. Russia knows that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought," end quote. As of 2019, the United States had 150 tactical nuclear warheads stationed throughout Europe as part of the NATO nuclear arsenal, including in Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey. Sunday, one day ahead of the scheduled nuclear drill, China told its citizens living in Ukraine to evacuate the country, citing the grave security situation. In announcing the Steadfast Noon exercise, NATO said the training flights include, quote, 14 countries and up to 60 aircraft of various types, including 4th and 5th generation fighter jets, as well as surveillance and tanker aircraft, end quote. The flights will take place over Belgium, which is hosting the exercise, as well as over the North Sea in the United Kingdom. And if that doesn't grab your attention, nothing will. There are no innocent players in this conflict besides us, the civilians, the real people of this world. The governments of Russia, the United States, Ukraine, do not represent the people. These are communists, fascists, secularists, evangelicals, Orthodox, from all different backgrounds, who have one goal in mind, that is to keep mankind under the dominion of power of their specific governments. Because if it was to the will of the people, this conflict wouldn't exist, and no conflict would ever exist. Special thanks to the Libertarian Institute, who are still keeping the public informed about the most important aspects of human life. Scott Horton, Kyle Anzalone, Dave DeCamp, Will Porter, Patrick McFarland, Tommy Salmons, Connor Freeman. Thank you very much for the breaking news regarding what's going on in Ukraine and U.S. imperialism in general. Because what we don't need is another war.
And also the global sorrow of mankind, which has faced thousands and thousands of wars. Millions and millions of people have cried. And this war machine is still going on, directed by the politicians, by our nationalism, by our feeling that we are separate from the rest, we and they, you and me. That's the global sorrow, which the politicians are building. And we are ready for another war. I hope there won't be, but when you are preparing for something, there must be some kind of explosion somewhere. It may not be in the Middle East, it may happen here. As long as you are preparing for something, you're going to get it. Like preparing food. But we are so, if I may use the word, without disrespect, We are so stupid to allow all this to go on. Terrorism, you know the whole